Okay, this week's Sky Cricket podcast comes to you from Multan. It is 10:15 in the morning here on the day before the second Test match. We're recording in a commentary box that's overlooking the ground. Behind us, England are playing football, which is their usual kind of warm-up routine, and Pakistan are in a tight huddle as we speak. They've got a lot of things to digest and decide before the next Test match. And the old pitch, which may become the new pitch, is roped off, Nas. It looks as though Pakistan are preparing to play the second Test match on exactly the same as the first, which I think would be unprecedented. I can't think of a time that has happened.
I can't, and you're more of a historian of the game than me. I certainly can't. When we had that abandoned game, where was that?
Abandoned in Jamaica. We went to Trinidad then for two Test matches, but they were different pitches.
Right, okay.
And as you know, we've played back-to-back games now in the same stadium on a number of occasions, partly because of COVID. England did that in Ahmedabad, I think, and maybe Chennai as well, maybe even Galle, but always on a slightly different pitch. Anyway, we'll come on to the pitch because there's a lot to talk about there. But you've been in your Phileas Fogg routine, haven't you? Crossing the oceans, racking up the air miles, double dipping, dare I say it, flying between here and Dubai.
Giving back to the game, I think, is what you're looking for. Giving back to the game. The game has been so good.
Double dipping, I think we'll leave it there.
Racking up my Emirates points have gone up through.
You've been enjoying the Women's World Cup. So Australia are through. That's the news that we do know. And England, remarkably, having won all their games pretty convincingly, find themselves in a knockout game, effectively, against West Indies to make the semi-finals.
Yeah, we are getting to the business end of the tournament, and it is quite incredible. England have played three magnificent games, won them convincingly. I did the game yesterday against Scotland, where they knocked down Scotland's 106 in 10 overs, with Boucher and Danny Wyatt-Hodge just smashing it everywhere, and their net run rate went top, and I thought, well, that's it. You've got West Indies in your last game. But actually, if you look at it, if they lose to West Indies, I think they've got one ball to spare. So the game for England against the West Indies, they play in Dubai Tuesday night. That is effectively a quarter-final for them. So in both groups, we describe Group A as the group of death, and we'll come on to that. But even Group B, you lose one game, England could lose one game and not make it through the semi-finals. And the West Indies, with Hayley Matthews, Deandra Dottin and Hayley Matthews, I think they've hit the most sixes in the tournament, and Dubai is a better pitch than the one in Sharjah. And then last night, as I was flying back, one of my many flights while you've been here in Multan, I noticed I was following the Australia-India game, and India lost a close one to Australia, which means that if New Zealand beat Pakistan today, that game later today, that will knock India out, and India will rue losing a heavy loss in the first game to New Zealand.
Being the incisive pundit that you are, you backed England and Australia before that tournament. I mean,
both unbeaten.
Dramatically.
Both unbeaten. Sorry for being right. Yeah. Okay.
Have you moved away from that or not? You still think it's going to be an England-Australia?
Well, can I tell you after the West Indies game? But yeah, they've been the best two sides. I mean, Australia with a couple of injury concerns, and Healy in particular. She came into the ground yesterday as I was leaving. Healy hobbled on with one of those boots. Collingwood's been wearing that boot for about 3 months. So she's got a serious ankle injury. Didn't play yesterday, and they're leaving her for obvious reasons right to the last minute to make a decision on semi-final, and then obviously if they win, possibly in the final, on Sunday. But and England have been playing really good cricket. So yeah, they look the two best sides. South Africa, as ever, have played well. India have been a bit disappointing. Like I say, that first game, they will hope that Pakistan do them a favour and beat New Zealand. But
just a quick reflection on the tournament. I mean, it's one of the issues playing in the UAE is always crowds, isn't it? That sometimes you don't get kind of crowds and atmosphere that you would normally get.
Yeah, it's like a lot of tournaments. Any time India played, there was quite a few in. The India-Pakistan game in Dubai, which I did, there was a load in. Last night, as I was leaving, the crowds were streaming in to Sharjah. Australia, India, that rivalry now in men's and women's cricket is huge. The rest, there haven't been many in, to be honest. And also conditions. It would have been in Bangladesh, which would have been similar, if not slightly worse conditions, maybe in Dhaka. It would have spun more. So there have not been as many sixes hit. When I left yesterday, there was only like 21. I think there was a few yesterday as well, so that would have gone up a bit. So turgid pitches, a bit slow. The outfield in Sharjah to start the tournament was slow, and that's a difficult combination with a slow outfield and a slow pitch and slow bowlers generally. I also think there is a two-tier, and you could argue it's creeping into the men's game, but in the women's game, definitely the haves and the have-nots are getting wider apart. And I think it's not just money, I think it's also just size. You know, the Bangladesh, Pakistan, Scotland I did yesterday, they're just slight in build and can't clear the boundaries, can't hit boundaries. Whereas you look at Australia, you look at England, stronger New Zealand, South Africa, they are stronger with bigger reach and bigger levers, and they're hitting more boundaries. So I think, you know, the women's game does not have to somehow close that gap. I think it's a bit predictable. And what have you been up to, by the way? While I've been working, what have you been doing?
Time has been passing somewhat slowly in Multan, I have to say.
Golf? Did you golf?
I didn't golf. I've slightly gone in the back
Surprise.
From a gym routine the other day. So had a scheduled golf game, but didn't play. England, of course, are ensconced at the beautiful golf course. It's called the Romanza, I think, out there. So they're very happy. They're in clover, actually.
Who would have played the most games of golf?
Well, I don't know. I reckon my money's on Collingwood, perhaps.
Trez,
Gothic.
yeah.
Our producer's been going well, actually.
That's it. Good. Great.
Anyway.
We've got a bit of illness in our camp, actually.
We haven't spoken since the first test, which was an extraordinary win, really, given that Pakistan made 550 in their first innings, obviously becoming the first team ever to lose by an innings, having made more than 500 in the first innings of a test. Just a reflection on that win, really. I mean, I suppose there have been some extraordinary wins under Brendan McCullum and Ben Stokes. You can think of Rawalpindi here a couple of years ago, Hyderabad in India. A, where does that one rank in recent Bazball victories? And B, perhaps, you know, both of us have been playing and following England now for 30 years or so, and I can think of some fantastic wins. Jamaica 1990 that you played in, Barbados 94, Karachi 2000. How does this one rank?
Depends what you mean by where does it rank. Is it England's best win in that period? I don't think so. Those games you mentioned, you could argue the opposition and where England were at that stage as well. Like my first game, my first test match, you know, we were the young Lions or whatever against the great West Indies side. So that came from nowhere. But I think it was the most extraordinary win I've seen for a very, very long time. And even in a way that you could see it almost coming. And I didn't see it coming at 5:56 because the pitch was so flat. I thought England would have to score so quickly and so many, and then the pitch would have to disintegrate. And you made an excellent point. On the first morning, you said, everyone keeps talking about these pitches out here and they'll deteriorate and they'll be spinning. And by day 4, day 5, it didn't. It didn't spin. Leach got wickets on that last day, but it didn't spin hardly one for him. So as an extraordinary, virtually everything had to go right from 5-5-6 for them to pull off that win. And they won comfortably in the end. It wasn't like here last time.
They could have won by the fourth evening.
Yeah, Bashir taking that catch.
Yeah, I mean, they dropped 4 catches. One was hard to call a chance, really, in the gully, but 3 others that could have been taken. Shan Masood twice at mid-off, Shoaib at deep backward square. And had that been taken, then a 4-day victory was on the cards, which, if you think where that game was on the 3rd morning, is incredible, really. A
reflection of England and how they're playing, or a reflection of Pakistan?
Well, it's a bit of both. We'll come to Pakistan in a minute, I think. But obviously that win was based principally on the batting and the speed of the batting, which was the common factor to England's win here 2 years ago, scoring at such a rate that they buy themselves time in the game. In Rawalpindi 2 years ago, of course, England scored 500 on that first day. They didn't quite go at that same rate here, but they went at a rate, 5 runs and more, for that length of time, which is extraordinary. Joe Root, so he became England's leading run scorer, didn't he, in the game? What's the essence of his greatness, do you think?
His love of the game, his love of batting, his enjoyment. I mean, we played the game for a long time. Maybe we had a few more ups and downs, I don't know, but
He's never had many downs.
No, exactly. So maybe it is easier to enjoy, but time away from home, time away from family, time in the nets, time with your fitness. There's a lot that goes into being a professional cricketer, an England cricketer. You know, people will say, oh, it's a great life or whatever. You can get a bit claustrophobic and it can get on top of you. And Joe seems to have managed to keep that love of the game and batting and that hunger. Sometimes that hunger begins to get diminished. Do I need this? It's always easier to say, right, I'll move on, and family and kids. And he seems to have kept that hunger. And it's not false. Some people sort of bluff their way through it. When you meet him in the mornings, he's the first one out there doing throwdowns. He'll have a joy. If he's got a new bat, he'll come over for a chat about anything really, but mainly batting and cricket. So like the greats I've played with, like Graham Gooch was like that. Alec was like that. Alec, just cricket's in his blood, isn't it? From Mickey passed down. Gucci just loved the game of cricket. Even Sir Alistair Cook just really enjoyed batting. So it might seem like an odd thing to say, but I think that really helps. And that's kept, and obviously the fluency and his skill, the skill level is incredible. I know we always have a debate, but he would be the best you've seen. I know you've got to be in your body about this.
Well,
you were going on about Wally Hammond to me this morning.
I find it, I mean, comparing down the eras and down the ages is a bit of a mug's game, isn't it? Because none of us saw Hammond or Compton or Hutton or any of these guys. And my view is that you can only really judge someone within their own era. Obviously, standards in sport improve inexorably. You know, the standards today are much higher than they were in the 1930s or 1940s. But within their era, if somebody like a Hammond, for example, stood out in the way that perhaps Root stands out now, that's all you can judge it on. And I actually was looking back. I obviously never saw Wally Hammond play, as old as I am. Extraordinary record, you know. 7 Test match double hundreds, which is more than Joe. 36 first-class double hundreds. An average of 58 in Test cricket, a triple hundred. I mean, he must have been a good player, right? So I think all I would argue is that we don't be dismissive of the past, because in 100 years' time, some young kid will come along from Yorkshire and be absolutely brilliant. And, you know, the pundits of the day, the Nasser Hussain of the day will say, he's the best ever.
I've ever seen,
And of course, what you don't want is then somebody like Joe Root to be forgotten either. So that would be my only plea. The other interesting aspect I thought about Root's innings was that I've seen 1 or 2 comments from people about his record post-Rajkot, post that. You remember that reverse sweep that he played in Rajkot off Jasprit Bumrah? And he got roundly criticised for that. Fair enough on the day. And people have said that I think his average since then is about 90 or something. It's an incredible thing. And he's largely put away that shot. And people have been saying, well, he's recalibrated his game. And it shows we were right to criticise him and that he was wrong to play that kind of shots. I don't actually buy that. Because I think part of Root's greatness been his willingness to keep looking to get better and keep improving and keep experimenting. I think with a closed mind, if you like, if he'd have just said, when Ben Stokes and Brendan McCullum came in, if he'd have said, no, I'm going to stick to what I do. I'm not even going to consider buying into the Bazball philosophy. He's not had that attitude throughout his career. And I think actually part of that willingness to be open-minded and to experiment has actually been part of his greatness. And I agree he's recalibrated since Rajkot, but I actually think his willingness to reverse scoop is an important part of his game. And
the team, because if Stokes and McCullum have got Root buying into it, or everyone that comes into the team and sees Root, one of England's all-time great, with the great Wally, is, if he's buying into it, then they're going to buy into it. That's the only thing I'd say is that they have had a slight reset with the bat. They do seem to be the hooking at Lords against Australia. You know, I think there were times in India, that series everyone remembers as if England got hammered 4-1, when actually in a couple of those games, they were in strong positions and they weren't ruthless with the bat. So I do think there has been a reset, but that, again, for me, is remarkable here. What happened here last week was that they got 800 and what? And the same number of overs that Pakistan got 556. So they've been ruthless.
260 more runs in one less over.
Yeah, so they have gone and smashed it but being ruthless, and they got that combination. Well, what about the lad at the other end, Harry Brook? Because
Well,
I think Root knows his history and loves his history. When we had Harry over and we showed him the table of the people he'd gone past or people he could have gone past, he went, well, I only know Graham Gooch. That was the only one I knew.
well, what he said was that he had his main aim was to get past his dad's score. His dad was a good player in the leagues, and his dad's highest score in the leagues was 210. Harry, of course, had never made a first-class double hundred before, so he ticked off his dad. And then he had Gooch in his mind, I think. No idea about Len Hutton, who's a Yorkie, and he's from Pudsey, and of course one of England's greatest ever players. Anyway,
were you playing in that Gooch game, by the way?
I was.
You were?
I didn't get.
How many
I
did you
did.
get?
I did Nolly Pope.
Did you?
I got none when Gooch. Well, I got 8 or something. I did get a few in the second innings.
Oh, well played.
But,
let's move on.
yeah, no, no, extraordinary innings from Harry Brook. And 300. What was your highest score, by the way, in first-class cricket?
That was Edgbaston, 207.
That was your
Test match,
highest, was it? Yeah.
You?
Well, for Lancashire, I got a 268.
Was that on the flat one at the Oval or not?
It was a very flat pitch at Blackpool.
Right.
I played in an Oval game where Neil Fairbrother got 366. I got 190. But
Well played.
in that game, it was something like Surrey got 700. It was a bit like this, not at the same rate. Surrey got 700. Lancashire passed them, got 800 odd, and the groundsman was knocking in a nail into the scoreboard in the days so long ago, the days when it was done the scoreboard, just in case we got to 1,000.
Why was someone sending me a picture of a roller the other day on Twitter saying, show this to Athers?
Because in 1938, when Hutton got his 364, the groundsman was a very famous guy called Bosser Martin, and he had a 30-ton roller, and they named it Bosser's Pet, and he rolled this pitch into submission, and it was the flattest thing of all time, and it was a timeless test. And he was miffed when England declared at 900 for 7, 903 for 7. He was a bit miffed because he wanted England to get 1,000, but then proudly stood for a photo by his roller. So that was Bosser's Pet. But what an extraordinary innings from Harry Brook. No England batter has ever got 2 300s in a test, and maybe these things only come around once a blue moon. We've only ever had 6 by England batters in the 1,000 and more tests that England have played. Could he be the one to get 2? I mean, he scores at such a rate. It wasn't actually beyond the realms of possibility that he could challenge Lara's score at the rate he's batting. And Lara himself, I think, a year or 2 ago said, I put to him, who could break your record? And he said, well, these kids like Jaiswal and Brook, who score at such a rate, they're the ones who are a danger.
Yeah, he could. I'm looking at the Future Tours programme and how many games England have got in Pakistan.
He played 4 of his first 20 tests or something here. That is a...
Yeah, so if they play here much more, and the way he bats here, they made it. I mean, who knows? But it was a joy to watch. What I like about Harry Brook is the simplicity of the lad, and I mean that in the nicest of ways. You know, he walked past me here on the tour previous when he'd got some runs, every time he gets runs here, and he just turned to me, and I was talking down camera about him, and he just turned to me and said, Nass, I love batting. and I think that is, that everything else, he doesn't complicate. What was he when he got his first 100? I don't do that celebrations nonsense. He just wants to bat. He sees it as that is his job. And that is a really nice place to be in. I'm supposed to get runs. You know, it's like, you know, Roy Keane's famous, just do your job, mate, sort of thing. And that's what Harry Brook seems to do. So get on to the second, if I can, because that did set him up for the win. But was it inexcusable on that pitch for Pakistan then to be 80 for 6? Or is it the baggage? Is it the third innings? Is it everything comes back to haunt you?
Well, it didn't surprise me. Right at the end of England's innings, when they'd got 800 whatever, that catch down here, right just below us actually, where Saud Shakil dropped an absolute sitter at long on. And you looked at them in the field then and you thought, they're cooked here, they're absolutely cooked. And of course that is what Test cricket is. It's just can be a hard game. You know, when Steve Waugh talked about mental disintegration, people often take that to mean he was talking about, you know, Australian sledging. I took that to mean Test cricket just can get on top of you. And after 150 overs in the field, being flogged around at 5 and more and over, conceding 800 and plenty, it didn't surprise me then what happened. The pitch was still good, But, that first ball, Abdullah Shafiq, he ain't missing that. It's a pretty good ball, but he ain't missing that in the first innings. Shan Masood, who scored 100 in the first innings, suddenly he's offering catches twice to mid-off. That's just a consequence of the mental strain that Pakistan were under in that field. So it didn't surprise me, but credit to England. Just a couple of reflections, I suppose. One, the Bashir-Leach combination. Leach back in did really well. Pope as captain, he had an interesting psychological thing there. Who to go to first? Bashir's the first choice spinner for England. Leach is the first choice spinner for Somerset. Probably Bashir just having his first, I don't know whether you call it a wobble, but he didn't bowl particularly well in that game, and Leach did.
Yeah, I mean, Leach is closer to the finished article, which is understandable. He's been playing a lot of first-class cricket. He's played here, he's played for England, he's been well captained, he's very familiar in the surroundings. So as far as who was going to be more reliable, it was always going to be Leach, and that's why he was selected. He's always been reliable for England, whereas Bashir is just starting the game as a spinner, really. The amount of first-class games, balls he's bowled, so they're picking on him what he could become, that high ceiling that he could become. He's nowhere near there yet. The only thing I'd say about Bashir, and I've said this a couple of times now, is that I don't like the way that he's now, since India, constantly bowling in a defensive mode. I understand why he's doing that, because he's not bowling, even this one didn't spin, so he's not bowling on big, raging Bunsen burners. So, as Jeetan Patel said to us on interview, if he does bowl outside off, it opens up the offside, but it also opens up the slog sweeps and the leg side. So he wants, at the moment, it's a control, but I'd like to see a little bit more attacking. That swan delivery to get Ricky Ponting out, dip and drop and drift, and then spin in. You think of Nathan Lyon, that's what he's been picked for Australia and Ashes, and getting that line. If you can't bowl that line with 800 on the board and the opposition 80 for 6 on a 4/5 day pitch, I don't know when you can. So if this one does spin, which we all hope it will because it's been used for 5 days, if that's the one they use, I want to see him a little bit more attacking. I thought he had a pretty good game as a captain, Ollie Pope, really. I think he did things pretty well. And the last morning it drifted a bit and they dropped some catches, but I thought he captained pretty well. I think he did just about the right thing with those spinners.
And Bryden Carse was the eye-catching seamer for me. I mean, we know about Wokes, who's been around a long time, and Gus Atkinson obviously has burst onto the scene last summer, but that was Bryden Carse's debut. I thought he did a lot of things right. He looked pretty sharp. He ruffled a few feathers when he was asked to bowl short. He hit Ahmed Jamal on the head and bruised a few fingers. He looked quite skillful when the ball just started to reverse in that passage of play when Pakistan lost 6 for 80. And he kept coming. So I thought that was a big tick, actually.
Yeah, and he looks like he wants to put in a shift.
Yeah.
And I think, they may mix it up here. They may bring in Potts for Atkinson because of the toil bowling twice on that pitch. But I think that, Rob Key talks about the pace of bowlers. Yeah, we've played with some fast bowlers. It's hard work. The other side of that, you must want to bowl fast and you must enjoy the hard work. When we interviewed him at the end of one of the days, he looks like he enjoys putting in that shift. I think Potts is the same. I think Potts is a big, strong lad that will never really quit and say, I can't do it in this heat or on these pitches. I think
unless
leading
it's
up
40 degrees in Durham.
He was carried off that day, wasn't he? I think it was closer to 50 degrees, actually. So I'll take that back. Unless it's Durham, he's better away from home when it's really hot. So, but I think in Australia, you're going to need that. You're going to need that ticker. So, yeah, it was good to see. I think it was almost the perfect performance.
Let's turn our attentions to Pakistan. I mean, there is a slight whiff of A, panic, B, chaos. So
has it been a Pakistan week?
Well, it's been a classic Pakistan week, hasn't it? First of all, the thought that you're going to suddenly spring on everybody that you're going to play on the same pitch again. But B, then the selection for this second test match. So originally they only announced a squad for the first test. And then yesterday they announced the squad for the second and third test. And there are 4 omissions, but the eye-catching ones, the 3 who played in that first test match, were Babar Azam, Shaheen Shah Afridi, and Naseem Shah. And if you looked at that first test and you said to anybody, who are the 3 kind of big names or big stars, they're the 3 that you'd pick out. And yet all 3 have been omitted. I mean, let's take them one by one. Babar Azam's been in a for him, a bad run of form, 8-9 test matches without a 50. And as a multi-format player for a long period of time, it may be that he just needs a break from the game. That happens to everybody. My point would be, I think as a selection panel and people in charge of cricket, you've got to kind of think of these things ahead. So suddenly they spring this announcement now after one test match when you're 1-0 down, and it just smacks of a lack of forethought and a lack of planning. What do you reckon?
Yeah, listen, no one is undroppable. However good you are, however good your long-term record, however much of a great at the game or Pakistan or English cricket you are, if you don't produce the goods, your currency as a batter's runs and a bowler's wickets, that's what you're there for. But I do think legends of the game and great players deserve, by the work they've put in for a number of years when they've carried their team, like Babar Azam has done, I think they deserve a handling that, and with respect, really. So, and a little bit of forward planning and a forward thinking. I think that's what's lacking in Pakistan cricket. Even like with the venues, coming here, we didn't know where England were going to play. Still here, we sit here now, we don't really know where the third test. We don't know which pitch they're going to play on tomorrow for the second test. And that comes from behind the scenes and the changes that happen. I think you said in the paper today it was 26 different selectors. I read 27 the other in a different paper. 27
well,
different...
Nobody can keep count.
No, you can't keep counting the amount of selectors. I mean, how many have England had? Rob, 2 or 3, basically. 27, 26 different selectors, chairman of selectors, you know, everything, coaches, captains. So if you constantly change, name me one organisation that is successful, business or sport, that keep changing their manager or their chief exec or whatever. You know, I know one leads to the other. So when you have that much change, then you don't forward plan, you're very short term, and then you get to the first test and you lose, and then you think, right, I will drop Babar because he hasn't got any runs for 9 games. If that was the case, do it before, or give him 3 tests and say, we're going to give you a rest. I think he just deserved a little bit better than after 1 test. The issue is not Babar Azam, Shaheen Shah Afridi, Nazim Shah. The issue is behind the scenes in the way Pakistan cricket run their cricket. And some of it, you give them a bit of leeway because of the way the finances of the world game have gone with the big 3, and they're picking up the scraps like other nations are. So I really feel for Pakistan cricket, and we mustn't be too harsh for them, but at times they shoot themselves in the foot. Babar deserved a little bit more respect than after 1 game. And I saw some footage.
But don't you think there's a distinction here between, it seems to me Babar Azam's going to come back. You know, he's going to take a break from the game. He is an absolutely great player, and he's going to come back and do well. There is a slight distinction for me between the batting here and the bowling, though. I mean, Shaheen Shah Afridi, since his injury, his form has dropped off. I suppose the question is, will he manage to come back to his best? And partly it's what I see with a lot of bowlers around the world. We had this with West Indies when they came to England in the summer. Their bowlers arrived on the back of World T20, understandably, because they're involved in that. We saw it here 2 years ago when England arrived in Rawalpindi. Harris Rouse and Naseem Shah had come on the back of World T20. And therefore, bowlers are short of conditioning for the 5-day game. They don't play that much first-class cricket, understandably because of the schedule. But it means then when you come to a test match, and it's a long, hot game, and you've got to keep coming back, it's not that easy. So I suppose that there is a distinction to be made there, and how confident are we that somebody like Shaheen Shah Afridi can, in the current game with the schedules as they are, can get back to being at his best?
Not if you play half your games on pitches like this. I'm amazed it's taken this long. Now, past Pakistan greats will say, well, that's what we played on. Now, whether the ball, we haven't talked too much about the Kookaburra ball, a combination of the Kookaburra ball and these pitches, you know, the fact that they're having to play on the same pitch again, A, reflects on the Multan pitch, but B, reflects on the Pakistan bowling attack, that they feel, and Shah Massoud almost touched on it in this post-match press conference of England believed they could get 20 wickets on this pitch. Did we really believe? They didn't. They got 7 or 8, didn't they? So did they really believe? So they're literally having to play on a surface again to try and work out how they get 20 wickets in a test match because they don't believe that attack can do it. And that's an attack with Naseem Shah and Shaheen Shah Afridi in it. So I think it must be back-breaking work. You must be soul-destroying mentally as well to turn up, see pitch after pitch after pitch, and no wonder then you have an injury. No wonder your speeds are going down, and that might push you more towards, I'll just go and play white ball cricket.
I mean, that's my point, really. That's what I was kind of, getting to, that given the choice, then you're a cricketer and you think, well, play a 5-day game where I'm going to get flogged around for 800 and I've got to bowl 30 overs on a pitch that's not bouncing above shin height, or I can go and earn a few quid bowling 4 overs in a franchise. And so the incentives are all skewed against Test cricket, and therefore you get to a situation where the players are turning up for Test cricket having had very little, first class conditioning, if you like. I don't see the solution.
And also there's rumours in the background. I don't know how much they've been paid recently as well, Pakistan cricket. I don't know if they're just rumours.
Not as much as you, the way you're double dipping in Dubai. There's not really much point in speculating about the Pakistan team for the Test match, because we don't know what pitch we're going to play, and although we think it's going to be the same pitch, and we don't know what they're going to come up with.
They'll be good players. The ones that come in, I've looked at the records.
Yes.
Benedict sent us both there. I don't know how strong first-class cricket is, but, the lad Herrera who could come in, he's got a triple 100, and they're all averaging above 50, and they will all line. I've not seen an ugly Pakistan batter from Saeed Anwar to now. They all play and they all line up perfectly. With the bowling, Numan Ali could come in, 38-year-old left-arm spinner. If it spins, they'll play a couple of spinners. So we will see at that toss tomorrow. What about England? What's your sense with England?
Again, by the time this podcast goes out, England may well have announced their team. They haven't yet. It seems like Stokes is going to play, put in a hard shift yesterday. And in fact, the pitch being a used pitch actually makes the selection conundrum less of a conundrum for England, because if it was on a similar pitch to the first game, you'd be struggling to say Stokes as a third seamer, if he can only bowl 10 overs a day, is enough.
How's he looked? Because I've been working around the world.
He bowled for about 50 minutes yesterday in that net. One assumes he's had no adverse reaction. We'll wait and see. But given the fact that it could be the same pitch, Leach and Bashir will bowl a lot, and therefore Stokes can be the third seamer. So that, I would imagine, and then he will come in for. England may actually look to rotate a couple of the seamers, Wokes and Atkins. Anyway, we'll see. That's ahead of us. The game is tomorrow. What about just final reflection on the pitch, if we do play on the same pitch? I mean, I've looked at the regulations. There's absolutely nothing to say that you can't play on the same pitch. It's just down to the ground authority to choose and prepare the best possible pitch. And of course, the best really is the one that offers the best balance between the bat and ball. So it may be a very sensible decision to play on a used pitch and hope that we get more of a balance between bat and ball than we had last week.
Yeah, it would be better for Test cricket. I don't think we could have the first 4 days like we had of the last Test match. I mean, Wardy asked me a question at the end about that, and I was just about to answer, and you completely butted in and went on a huge rant about how the last Test, with all those records broken, that last Test was not good enough for Test match cricket. So you'll be pleased.
The
last pitch.
And of course, we're sat here. There's nobody in the ground now, of course, because teams are practicing. But it was a pretty poor turnout, and it's hard to blame locals here in Multan, because it started on a Monday. It's a working day. It's an out-of-town stadium. It's roasting hot, mid-late 30s. But, there are issues there in terms of the late scheduling, the Monday start. So fingers crossed for a slightly better live audience for this next game.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, we will catch up on the far side of the second test.